So, Damien, thank you so much for joining me. You're down in Los Angeles. I'm here in Northern California, in Nevada City. Um, and we have a very interesting conversation in the works here. But before we dive into um, what I think is going to be a really paradigm shifting conversation about consent, um, can you just tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, hi, my name is Damian Jones, and I'm a sculptor. I was much more on the left brain side of things. I grew up at like the math and science geek, like pretty, probably a little bit on the spectrum and on with Asperger's actually, like somewhat ADD and really like mentally focused. And then I began a career as an industrial designer, and then started going to Burning Man. And then that shifted my focus over to art. So in 2005, after about 15 years of working with clay, I decided to quit my engineering job and focus on that path instead, which has been wonderful, incredibly challenging and deeply rewarding as well. And and I've also been on a very deep healing journey. I did my first transformational course in 1990, which was the Landmark Forum. And I've been part of many communities, one major community that a lot of like healing technology came out of. And I've really kind of worked to kind of optimize my being over time. And so there's like, that's kind of the other side, major interests that I have, and the other side of my psyche.
Yeah, and healing. Well, I've been on a healing journey now for 35 years myself. So I know it's got a lot of different iterations, doesn't it? And
yeah,
talk about the proverbial onion. We just keep pulling layers off.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
there's
you
so much
you're in are you in a committed relationship, or you just got out of one?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't been in one for a couple of years actually.
Yeah.
Several years, mostly because of what I've been going through for the past few years.
Well, why
Has
don't
kind of
you go ahead and share what it is you've been going through for the past couple of years?
So, well, 4.5 years ago, I bought cocaine for the first time in my life. I'd done plenty of other substances up till that point, and hadn't had a lot of issues with them, and didn't think I'd have any with this, but I was really wrong, because I did a little bit the first night and a little more the next night, a little more the next night, and really got hooked on it. And after 6 nights or days of this, I went to a play party, a sexually open play party, with a community that was very kind of like that leads those kinds of things.
Right.
And it's very high level, very high levels of of consent and ask before you touch, and very it's very community oriented. And I met a woman there, and I was engaging with her sexually for 45 minutes or an hour, but we hadn't gone all the way.
Right.
And then she fell asleep because she'd had too much of something else. And I said, "Would you like me inside you?" Thinking that might be a good way to wake her up. I don't know. I wasn't really thinking much at the time.
Right.
And she didn't really respond. But I put on a condom, and for a few minutes I penetrated her without her permission. And then she woke up, and people, came in the room. And after that, I admitted to raping her to the whole community on Facebook. And since then, I've admitted it to like over 1,000 people, just really in an effort to take responsibility for my actions and to heal from it. Fortunately, she was taken very good care of by the community, and later, a few months afterwards, reported that she wasn't holding any trauma in her body. And so I'm grateful, really grateful that she had such good care, and also that this community, really gave me an opportunity to heal rather than going a punitive route. Um, and so I really surrendered to healing at that point. I'd done a lot of like transformational work to try to like improve myself, but hadn't really focused on basically what I discovered was a whole lot of shame that I was carrying from my childhood, from feeling rejected by everyone because I was super smart and could understand all these great things except how to connect with people. And so I, just carried a lot of sense of rejection from being the geek growing up, essentially. And that was running my life in many ways. And so the last 4.5 years has really been a deep excavation of my soul, and clearing out a whole lot of the shame that was running my system. And so what I've come to learn through this process, like I feel incredibly grateful now that all this has happened. I mean, I don't feel grateful for what I did. Clearly, I'll always feel, a sense of shame about that. That was, I violated her sovereignty, and in her body. But I'm grateful for where this has led me because I've now discovered a level of healing and a level of embodiments and real sovereignty in myself that I've never known. And this has led me to understand that we're all traumatized to various degrees. Like out of our bodies, just living in our heads too much, just trying to run our lives from there, and just trying to like feel safe enough to just relax and feel good in our bodies, to really enjoy and inhabit these homes that we're embodied within. And I think everyone has ways that they don't that things that trigger them and send them like too much up here. And I was a serious head case, so it's taken a lot of work and a lot of practice to really come back and inhabit my body. But I now feel like a sense of joy, a sense of being at home in the world. I've never felt at home in the world. I've always felt like a bit of an alien. And now I feel like, just deeply, deeply just comfortable in my own skin. And and have reconnected with the joy of being being embodied. It's like children have joy all the time, pretty much, right? Except when they don't, but most of the time. That was us. We used to be like that. And then, we just have made this migration up into our heads where we're living most of the time. But I've, so I just like the most powerful practice that I found, and the thing that's made the most impact in my healing started about 3 years ago when I started a practice of taking 3 breaths into my heart once an hour. So I've got a chime on my phone that goes off. I think it'll probably go off during this at some point. And I just pause and I take 3 breaths into my heart. And it's not even so much my heart, it's just feeling my chest, my lungs expand and contract, just feeling that sensation, just locating myself in my body and like escaping the tyranny and control. We're all like under mind control, this is like controlling our reality. But like we live here, this is our home, and we're all kind of homeless in a way, just like living just trapped up here, trying to find a sense of safety and security and wellness and well-being. But we can have it directly. We just have to come back into our bodies.
Our breath
and and this practice, like when my chime goes off now, like I get this instant hit of joy. And like, I didn't even really understand what the word sovereignty meant until this past year. But now I just feel so connected with my body and my wholeness, and feel the sense of like completeness in myself that has had always really eluded me. So
Damien,
that's the nutshell of it.
Yes, thank you for that summary. I want to, with your permission, I want to back up a little bit and ask you some questions, kind of slow us down on this. It's a lot for the viewers to take in right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first thing I'd like to go back to the night of the rape, and I'm wondering about your connection with this woman. Was there any way that the two of you worked on any healing between the two of you, or did you both just go your separate ways and do your own solo healing?
Mhm. Well, the aftermath was kind of guided by the person the organizer of the party,
Yeah.
who kind of stepped in and said, "Hey, we got to bring, like this is not, this is all wrong." And so he kind of stepped in, and the plan was for me to like work on healing myself for a year or two, and then for the woman and I to have a restorative justice meeting, to
Uh,
come and actually like have a meeting to bring that sense of completion to it. And so in the meantime, I sent messages to her through her boyfriend at the time, who's now her husband,
okay.
kind of just apprising her of my progress going, as I like continued, as I worked on this journey.
Right.
But she and I have not had any direct contact since the rape,
Okay.
by
Was
her
that her
choice.
choice? Oh, that's her
That
choice.
that's been her choice. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then about a year or so in, she decided she didn't want to have a restorative justice meeting. That she didn't want to dig it all up again. She just wanted to leave it behind her and go on with her life.
Okay.
And so that uh, and because I'd been showing up and like letting her know, hey, look, I'm taking this with absolute seriousness and really working to heal myself. That kind of led to that. But it kind of left me in limbo, because that would have been given a sense of completion with the community and with all my communities, about this, at least some degree of that. But there still hasn't been that since then. And so this was in July of 2016. So
Yeah.
it's been, yeah,
4.5
kind of,
years. Did
yeah.
it's a very difficult thing for any of us to admit to perpetrating. I admitted to
Mhm.
perpetrating domestic violence years ago. I actually spoke about it publicly at the podium level. I just recently did that online with you. Um, I found it was scary because I got some hate mail.
Mhm.
The domestic violence
Mhm.
that I perpetrated could have landed me in jail. It was pretty serious, and I've sought recovery since then. I haven't perpetrated any domestic violence for decades, and I'm really grateful for that. But did you ever feel frightened that somebody might prosecute you for this rape?
That, well, it would have to be her to do that. And she seemed to be willing to not go that route. And so, yeah, it's been a fear. It's definitely been like a concern of mine, many times during this journey, that she could choose to change her mind and prosecute me. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, that's definitely been there.
yeah.
Um,
I,
but I felt just a sense of safety or confidence in the community, that in the communities that we've been part of, that that route would not be chosen, because just because this community that we're both part of, and the in various communities that overlap,
right.
are have really been about healing, been about transformation. And so yeah, it hasn't. There's definitely been times when I've been kind of terrified about that. But
Yeah, yeah. It's hard for me sometimes just to even say. And it's
mhm,
interesting because you were high on cocaine at the time, and I'm a
mhm,
recovered drug addict. I've got 35 plus years of clean and sober. There is no way that I'm going to blame my perpetrations on drugs and alcohol. However, I am intimately acquainted with the fact that it can lessen our impulse control. It can weaken us so that we do things that we might not have done had we not been high. And the
Yes.
worst domestic violence that I ever perpetrated was stabbing my boyfriend with a pair of scissors. Um, I was very high on cocaine at the time. And I had all kinds of justifications for why I was doing it because, you know, a few weeks before that, he had beaten me into a bloody pulp. And so I thought I was getting even. But I want to understand what your relationship is now with the fact that you were high at the time on cocaine
Mhm.
and culpability of just like what other sorts of things were going on inside you, because the fact of the matter is I ended up perpetrating domestic violence clean and sober, not on cocaine, and thankfully I never ever stabbed anybody again in my life, something I'm very grateful for. But that ability to perpetrate was still living in me whether I was high or not. So I'm just curious how you hold that.
Um, well, first of all, I haven't done cocaine since that night, and I never will. Um, and it was never really a draw for me, anyways. And so, um, I would say that uh, my relationship to it is that, like, um, I've had 3 long-term relationships, and have still have great relationships with all 3 of them, and have been very, like, I've made other consent violations with women in the past, like, much milder ones. And as soon as, but I've never transgressed a woman's no. Uh, and once a woman expressed like that I crossed a boundary, that would activate my shame, and I would just back off and apologize. So I would always blame myself for, and it's like whatever I did, pretty much. And so um, what I what I've come to understand about myself and about shame in general, about our wounds in general, is that, like, I was really living in my head with a deep disconnect from my heart and my body, and therefore from a felt empathic connection with other people. And that I've really worked to heal my empathy, essentially, and by just getting back in touch with my body. And I feel in like infinitely more compassionate and empathic with everyone now, and feel much more attuned with people, and with my world, and with community, with everything, because I'm in my body. Because like, we're not telepathic, but we are telepathic. We can feel each other, but we have to be attuned to our own bodies in order to do that. So through focusing on healing those, I would make a lot of like little, I'd just be awkward. I was a geek. I was like, I would show up as the creepy guy sometimes, by doing like saying and doing awkward, weird things with women, so that they'd reject me, so I could fulfill my identity, of like, oh, that's what they're always going to do, because that's because being attracted to a really beautiful woman would always trigger my shame. Essentially, that was like where, like, that would always usually have me do something to have them not want to be with me anymore, because that was my wound that was getting triggered, and my lack of self-worth and self-value. But now I've discovered my true value. Like, I know my true value as an existent part of the universe. Like, by coming back in touch with my body, like, that's our true value. We're all kind of externally focused on value, but like, knowing my intrinsic value now, like, and thereby respecting everyone else's, like, I feel yeah, I don't feel like I'm capable of doing the kinds of mindless, like minor harms that I used to be. I don't want to. I just want to address this. Like talking about minor violations. I don't like. They're not minor for like it's not like they weren't raped. But just doing and saying awkward things to women that make them uncomfortable, or being the guy who would say the sexually like uncomfortable thing, and thereby kind of making these like little or relatively more minor violations. Like I've come to understand that for women in many cases, like they're not minor, and they're not isolated incidents. It's like one more shovelful of shit on the mountain that that all women are carrying from all the violations. One more reason not to trust men. One more bar in the patriarchal cage of oppression and repression and suppression that has really controlled and dominated women and the feminine in all of us since forever. And I've put a lot of those bars up in women's experience, like in women's experiences through my life. And my commitment for the rest of my life is to work to remove them, to work to a space where women, and really, like as I said, the feminine in all of us, can feel completely safe, completely seen, and like revered and honored, and able to unfurl and in whatever way it wants to.
I, I think you're pointing to something really important, which is when I contextualize the domestic violence that was perpetrated against me, the domestic violence that I perpetrated, as coming from a violent society. And both my ex-husband and I grew up in violent homes. So we had that type of behavior modeled for us. And it was really interesting because after we both got clean and sober, we thought the worst was behind us, but then we got married. And something about us saying our wedding vows that brought up my mother and his dad. It was like all of a sudden we were transformed into these other people.
Wow.
So we hear a lot about rape culture. And I just wanted for you and I to share a little bit about that. I'm a rape survivor. I've been raped 3 times by 3 different men. And I would have loved to have been able to have conversations like this with those men, because I think that there's a way in which both the perpetrator and the survivor don't get to fully heal, because we never get to unpack what happened between us. And I'm actually wanting to shift the conversation culturally at some point to where we can stop labeling people as perpetrators and survivors, because I'm both. Most of the people I work with, even if they have perpetrated, have also been perpetrated against, which makes them survivors. And on some level, when we start labeling each other, we don't actually get to heal, and we don't get to heal the culture. So I'm just wondering, as a cisgender male who grew up in this culture, which has been acknowledged as being a rape culture, what kind of things, other than your own personal relationship with yourself, what kind of things do you feel like you had to move past to change your perspective? Because I know for me, I had to move past the idea that somehow or another Thelma and Louise, which was a very popular movie in the 90s, were my heroes, that women part of our power was to be violent. And I'm just wondering, what is it for you that you reject culturally now?
Well, I mean, that's just tapping onto what you just said. The thing about Thelma and Louise and why they're role models for women is because they got to express their anger and their rage, and that's what women are denied in our culture. Women are not allowed to be angry. They're not allowed to express their rage. if they can do it without directing harm at other people, right? Then it's can be a purifying rage. I like I'm here to untap women's fury, quite frankly. Fury, like, but like clean fury, like anger harnessed in a positive direction, not out to harm, not out to harm. And also to help bring men back in our bodies. Like men have been taught since forever to just to not feel, to not be sensitive, to not be vulnerable, and to not be anything remotely feminine, right? So that whole side of our persona has been kind of denied us. Whereas, you know, for women, y'all have been exploring the masculine side of your psyches for 50, you know, for half a decade, for half a century now. So I believe women are actually more, probably more complete beings than men are, because we have both sides of us. We have masculine and feminine in us, and unless we can access all aspects of our being, we're not truly free. And we're, you know, we're going to be run by those things that we can't be. Um, so so yeah, that's I really want to work. I mean, I want to work deeply with men to help men come back into our bodies, so that we can truly understand the negative impacts we're having on women, like the real harm that's being caused and the real pain that's being caused, because we don't feel it, because we're told to just, like, you know, suck it up and just move on and deal with it. And oh, it's no big deal, and oh, it's just one little thing. It's not just one little thing. It's like it, for women, it just created a dominant paradigm of domination
Well,
and
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 Damien,
fear.
that as I think what you're pointing to is so crucial. I really do, and it really gets. I feel passionate about this, and I want to check with you and see if you agree with me. Please don't feel any pressure to agree with me, but I think that to the degree that we don't have compassion for ourselves, then we're not able to tap into our empathy for others. And we sometimes think that empathy is something that you have to learn. And actually, there's been a lot of research that shows that animals less sophisticated than humans have tons of empathy. Nobody has to teach them. And
Mhm.
so you actually have to kind of beat it out of us. And I think the way that little boys are raised oftentimes, if not physically, emotionally beats the empathy out of them. Do you think that's
Mhm.
true?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and not even, you know, most of the time they don't even have to be beaten. They see other kids going through it, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not going there." And we learn our, you know, our roles, and through that, and kind of get traumatized by proxy, by, you know, vicarious trauma in a way. Um, and uh, yeah, um, let me collect my thought for a minute.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a heavy topic.
yeah, it's you know, this, I feel like this is the it's well, okay, here's, let me move it to this side. That, like, I believe we have two ways of knowing. We have two ways of accessing information or tapping into the universe. There's the intellect and there's intuition. And intuition is real. Like, we are a connected whole organism. All of life is connected. But we have pursued this intellectual individual path by necessity. It's like, because for the bigger picture of this, life is trying to create autonomous creatures that can manage their own survival and, you know, live good lives. And so the way to do that is to, like, live your own autonomous, separate, independent life. And that's what culture is optimized for. That's what life is optimized for in evolution. And that's what our culture is optimized for. That's what America was the place you could leave your culture behind and discover your own individual manifest destiny, like whatever that might be. Like, that was like the, because, you know, there was no culture here. Well, there was a lot of culture here in the Native Americans, but we know what happened with them. So like the dominant like European culture came over and crushed and decimated and slaughtered all of the existing culture that was here, and has been, and now that way of being is kind of spread across the rest of the planet. But
Oh,
now we've really optimized for independence, and now it's time to discover our interdependence and to let go of the need to know everything, this kind of mental, intellectual, patriarchal control that humanity is expressing, has been expressing, for the last couple thousand years. And to come back to our hearts, come back to our intuition, to know intrinsically, because that like we burned our intuition, we cauterized that when we burned the witches, essentially. And right, and like all of the ways that we've demonized intrinsic knowledge and intuitive knowledge and knowledge of the heart. And because we can't put numbers on it, because we can't, you can't prove it, you can't measure it. It's hard to be scientific about those kinds of things. And so now is the time for us to regain our intuition, to move back into our hearts, to truly heal ourselves. This is the other main confluence or evolution or flow that's, I believe, is happening in our time, is Eastern and Western spiritual systems, where in the Western spiritual system, like we're forever separated from our divinity while we're in these bodies. That's the rule. And we got to earn our way back. We got to earn God's approval to like earn our way back to divinity, but we're not divine here. Right. Whereas in the Eastern traditions, with Hinduism, you got many gods, and they're all very human. They're all much more human. Or with Buddhism, there is no God. It's just go within and find your truth. So in either way, there's not this sense of separation from our divinity, which I believe is what led Western civilization to become so technologically advanced. It's like, oh shit, I'm alone here. I better figure out how this place works, right? And also harsh winters that led to that. But anyway, led to need for innovation. But that's my personal belief on why technological innovation kind of spurred out of the Western spiritual system.
Yeah.
So but it's both. It's like we have this incredibly powerful minds that can understand nature by studying it, by studying all the external ways that it manifests. But we've barely tapped on the truth within, and that's but with the West, we are focused on optimizing the individual. So starting with Freud and psychoanalysis and all the healing modalities and ways of healing ourselves that have come from that, we have really been working on coming back to our wholeness. Yeah. And healing the traumas, the ancestral trauma that we're all carrying. It's like we're born into an ongoing catastrophe.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It's like,
yes.
Yeah.
And David, I want to know, aside from that DNA burden that we all have, because we now know from epigenetics that trauma that was in our DNA passed down to us actually manifests results. So, but did you have any personal trauma in your life that led to your committing this rape?
I didn't have any major, I don't think I had any major incidents of trauma, other than almost being beaten up a couple times by bullies, growing up. Yeah. But I had a lot of micro traumas of just being teased and bullied and rejected. So it was a culmination of a whole lot of little things.
Right.
And so I just kind of retreated more into my head. I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, and just kind of internalized that sense of shame. So there wasn't a major, there were a few major things. Okay, so my mom caught me with a Playboy in the bathroom at when I was 14, and it was my stepbrothers, and and he was allowed to have them, and she was not happy with that, and she and my stepdad had a lot of issues as well. So that was a little too much for her, and she slapped me when she found it. So that was like one kind of made deeply shaming trauma that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, she and I talk about this now. We laugh about it. It's all somewhat behind us, but it's still like wired into my neurology. But other than that, like I don't have a lot of like I didn't have to deal with, as you did, like anger and violence growing up. So that's not in my being, and I haven't had to express that. But like it's just the woundings from shame, and the ways that kind of leaks out sideways in my or has leaked out sideways in my relationships.
Another question that comes up is that in some instances, men and women have a different idea of what happened. Um, I've been raped 3 times. I am positive that 2 of those men know they raped me. One of them was a serial rapist. It was his hobby. The other one was a convicted felon who had raped before. But the first time that I was raped in college was a college guy that he was in my dormitory. I was kind of sweet on him. I couldn't wait to meet him. I was so excited when he kissed me. And then he went into a place that I perceived and experienced as rape. It was very traumatizing and humiliating for me. But I don't know that I don't know that he thought it was rape at the time. I don't know that he would think it was rape now. So I want
Mhm.
to ask you, at the time that you perpetrated the rape, did you think you were raping her?
No, like it didn't occur to me until the next day when I got the call from the organizer of the party asking me what happened, and then saying, dude, that was rape. And like
Yeah.
I was uh yeah, I was just stunned and kind of pretty disgusted with myself, and
Wow.
in a lot of pain about that for a long time.
Yeah.
But like cocaine, like my explanation, cocaine, it's similar to Novocaine. It's like it numbs our it's kind of like Novocaine for the soul, because it numbs out our traumas. It
Yep.
numbs out our feelings and our fears, but it also numbs our compassion.
Yes.
So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel it operates.
Oh, that's exactly what it
But
does.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 But like after that, I like look back at my past, and and I've really worked to not leave any traumatic experiences behind me through my life. So if a woman had an issue with something that I did, I usually would, I like for the most part, I would try to really hear her and understand what her experience was, and to bring completion to that experience. So,
Yeah.
but like it also, like this whole journey has really revealed to me how much women are violated like all the time, like how it's been like that's what rape culture is like all of these subtle and not so subtle violations that make the larger violations permissible, or not, or not not as we kind of disguise to ourselves the impact of what we're doing, or the actuality of what we're doing.
So that
And I
is,
feel for
yeah.
hmm?
So we're talking about, if as a male if you're not embodied and therefore not feeling your empathy, that it's more difficult for you to connect with what pain you may be causing another human being. Is
Hmm.
there is there a place around male entitlement? Have you explored that topic about um, and if so, what kind of insights do you have about the this concept that we have often heard a lot about male entitlement?
Yeah, as a white male in this society, I have, come to understand that, wow, I do kind of feel like way more entitled to things than a lot of other than than non-whites do, and non-males do. Um, that our culture was built by white males for white males, essentially,
Mm.
and that like initially that was the main, like, you know beneficiary, the only beneficiary of the systems
But
that
but
were
isn't
created.
part of that culture, sorry to interrupt you, but there's one point I want to highlight here. Um,
Mhm.
isn't part of that male entitlement the idea that certain women are kind of asking for it? And the reason I'm asking, uh, kind of delving into this, is I'm just thinking, like, the guy in my college dormitory room, he knew I had a crush on him. He knew
Mhm.
I wanted him to kiss him. I mean, it was the whole thing was kind of a setup, and I almost feel like he felt entitled to take whatever he wanted from me because of that. And I'm just
Mhm.
wondering, if you were at a situation where people are having group sex, and you actually had been engaged with this woman physically, was there any part of you that felt entitled to take it further, even though she wasn't conscious?
I wouldn't say. I mean, in my mind at the time, there was this fabrication that I was trying to make her feel good. I was doing this for her pleasure as much as mine. I've always been very focused on my partner's pleasure. That's like I'm way more focused on my partner's pleasure than my own generally. And so that was the mental manipulation that I went through. It was like, oh, this is for her.
Mm.
This is ridiculous. And I don't, I'm not blaming the cocaine for my actions. Like, I committed that act,
Yeah,
and I would not have been thinking that way had I not been, had that drug not been in my system.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so, well, let me, uh, like, I don't know. This might be a little Okay, I'll just dive into it.
Okay.
Controversial, but
It's the shade free zone. And if you're tuning in now, trigger warnings, we are talking about consent and rape.
yeah, yeah. Um, so, like, my personal experience as a man, and I believe most men's experience, unless, except for very empathic men, which there are plenty of, but like most men are not, or most men are less empathic than most women. Like, I would say that's kind of a blanket statement, but I believe that, I think that's true. Um, Again, because we've been taught to not feel, not be sensitive, not be vulnerable, that being tough, not feeling, showing stoicism, showing that we can take any punishment, any pain, and, like, and not be impacted by it. That's like the masculine ideal. That's kind of what we've been taught. So we've been taught to not feel our bodies. And the only permission we have to really feel our bodies is when we have sex. Like,
Mm.
that's the only time we can truly feel like the ecstasy that is possible with our bodies is, is sexually. Like, that's the one place where we're allowed to feel, where we have not even, and we don't look at it as being allowed to. It's like where we have access to having that experience. And so, like, for men, eh, um, and and obviously women, the same is true for women. Like that's where women get to feel the most too, in general, for most women, for all humans. Like, our sexual intimate connections are like the places where we get to feel, truly just feel, and like the most, and just be present in our bodies the most. And so, men and women are like, yeah, like, let's have sex. Like, we all want that. Like, who doesn't want that? It's like, how do we? appropriately negotiate with each other so that we can have that experience together in a way that leaves us both satisfied and not violated. Like that's kind of the overarching question. Like that, and like so, men, yeah. So for men, they have been kind of taught that, oh, if it feels good for me, it'll feel good for them. Like, or like we're so, and it's because we're empathically retarded. You're empathically retarded. And
How about damaged, Damien? How about just
yeah, okay, yeah. Well,
empathically
wounded.
damaged?
Yeah, damage is a little too like is that like I'll say wounded or
Okay,
traumatized, but yeah,
wounded.
inhibited for sure. Um, and yet we so like, and I'm just going to be crude for a minute, but so it's like our only access to coming into our bodies and really feeling that is through sex with a being who has a vagina, and women have all the vaginas, you know. So it's like y'all have the market cornered on that particular anatomical aspect. So men need, that's our access to coming into our own bodies to the deepest levels that most men know. And I'm not saying that that's the only way, but it's the only way that most men know to feel, to truly
Thank you
feel.
for that clarification. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can meditate and create those experiences within yourself without anything, without any intermediary.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what that's we're beginning to open up to.
But I think you're pointing to a potential place of resentment in some men if they feel that they can
And
only
need to control that. Yeah.
if they feel like they can only access this part of themselves through a woman's body, and then if that woman doesn't give them access to that body, that they could actually be bitter, resentful, push into rape behavior around that.
Yeah, I think so, like for some men that's true. I mean, personally, I've never resonated with that
I know
because,
that that is
but
not at
but
all how you perpetrated. I get that.
yeah, yeah, it's like mine is I had some
Yeah,
different ways of going off course,
yeah,
but I feel that there is this like sense of desperation that
yeah.
like that most men aren't even aware of or present to,
Well,
and that we're honestly that we're just not taught right. We haven't been taught how to have like intimate consent filled conversations that leave both partners like whole and complete and satisfied and grateful. That's what's possible.
uh,
But because of the woundings that we all have, and especially because of like the demonization of sex and the sense of shame that's still like wrapped all around our sexuality, in our culture, and for in most people's experiences, it's like we look. I'm just gonna well, okay, there we are. Okay, where were we? Okay.
well, one of the things that I was thinking was that because we've been going for a little over an hour now, and this is a deep topic, Damien. I'd like to have you back so we can unpack this some more. Um,
Mhm.
what I think would be really good at this point is I know you are working to help other people heal, and I'd love to hear about the healing work that you're doing.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's I'm about to launch a program. I'm about to launch a month-long program on really like on how to heal. Like or how I'm calling it how to love yourself and the universe
Mm.
in the most like productive way. So and I also want to share like through my healing journey, over the last 4.5 years, I've worked with about 24 different healers and in all kinds of different modalities, from like traditional Western psychotherapy to shamanic healing to MDMA therapy to ayahuasca and San Pedro in Peru. Like I've really, before this point, I was like the skeptical like show me the data first, right? And then I'll believe it. But since this happened, I've just really opened myself to healing. It's like, oh, you're a healer. What do you got? Let's try it. Let's see if I've been like really engaged with healing at a deep level, and I feel like extraordinary. I feel kind of a little superhuman, actually. I feel well, mostly because like I feel like I can access joy whenever I want. Like no matter what craziness is going on up here, because I've still got a crazy mind. It still invents all kinds of disasters and catastrophizes all over the place, right? And the world is full of like craziness and reasons to feel unsafe and uncertain and insecure and fearful and traumatized and triggered, and like it's constantly like bombarding us. And I like this past year for me has been like just like it got incredibly difficult. There have been 3 women who have been triggered by me. I did not cross any of their boundaries in any major or harmful way, but they felt that I did. But it was, and they shut off conversation, and then it kind of built up into this pretty intense situation where they convinced the whole community that I was in active danger, that I was like actively raping people, essentially. Which is not true. Like in the last 4.5 years since the violation, I don't believe I've committed that I've crossed any significant boundaries or harmed anyone in any significant way. I've made mistakes for sure, and I believe I've done my best to harm that. So anyways, about a year ago, this blew up with this community, and they started warning other communities that I was in active danger. And I was like, I'm never going to recover from this. Like I've been trying to find my way back into society for like 4 years now, and like now that all this has happened, no one's ever going to believe me again. I'm gonna have to like dig a hole and crawl in it and pulling it over me. Like I can never like have a, it was resulted in me getting rejected from communities. Like I was rejected from a men's circle that was forming, and then quarantine happened and shut everything down. So I didn't have like events to go to be rejected from. So it was kind of a benefit for me. And like this, in the next couple of weeks, I'm about to put out a Facebook page that shares my entire healing journey, where I like really like admit publicly to what I did, and then share what I've done since then, and also talk about why these women have been triggered by me, and like what we can do to de-escalate the situation and really bring peace back to our communities. And I totally believe that's possible. But my point is that like going through this was terrifying. It was incredibly terrifying. But then my chime would go off, and I like breathe into my heart. And I'm like, oh, why do I feel so good? So this has really been where the rubber's met the road in my healing. Not only can I generate joy at will, but I haven't like let my my sense of anger and resentment like get outside of me and try to harm these women, or to like try to control the situation. I've been able to sit with it and sit with it and sit with it until some doorways to resolution have opened, and been able to hold this like intense situation within me and not freak out. And also like notice that like people I would be interacting with in my life while I was going through this, I would be kind. I'd be like kind and open-hearted and like, really attentive to them, able to like not obsessed by this intense shit that I was going through. And that was really different. Like I was really focused on leaving everyone with a good experience. Like focused on I call it my outer body. Everything outside my skin is my outer body. I have an inner body and an outer body. So you're part of my outer body. Everything's my outer body. And the more I take care of my outer body's needs, the more it takes care of my inner body's needs. It's a way of channeling synchronicity and magic, actually. And that's one of the modules of what I'm going to be teaching in this course.
I like that. When I take care of my outer body, I help my inner body. Fascinating.
Yeah, because we feel like we're separate, like right, that I'm just my inner body and I'm separate from the rest of the universe. Like I'm this separate self, and we can't see that but we know somewhere that we're connected, but our mind can't see it because our minds just see all the individual things and how they relate to all the other things, And that's how we build up our maps of reality, how reality works. But we can't see the forest for the trees. All we can see are the trees. We can't see the like overlying, like, oh, we are all connected. And here's how, if you treat your outer body better, like, here's how it's going to treat you. Here's how it will treat you better. That if you amplify your love signal, if you turn up like consistently, like put more love out, the universe will respond with more love back to you. And I've proven this to myself. In 2012, I started once a day doing something for my outer body, just some act of kindness, just going out of my way a little bit more, just amplifying my love signal. And ever since then, like the level of synchronicities in my life and magic and incredible connections and people coming in my life has just gone up and up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
It's a way to show the mind a connection between how much love we put out and how much we get back, like a causal connection, because it gives a pattern for our minds to recognize. And all it takes is just consistently like loving others more, a little bit more and a little bit more until it becomes a habit.
Yeah.
So
Damien, you really showed up with a tremendous amount of transparency and courage today. And I really want to thank you for that. And I personally believe that until we can start having these kind of conversations, we're just never going to heal. And healing is so important. It's not only important for us personally and for the society at large, but it's important for the next generation. And I want to thank you for your courage and your fortitude and your honesty. And I don't know if you want people to be able to reach you or not. If so, I want to invite you to be able to share how they could find out more about the healing program that you're going to be offering. It's up to you.
Yeah, for now, you can email damienart@gmail.com or find me on Facebook at Damien Jones and send me a message.
Okay.
But I'm going to be releasing this under the name Rishi Jones, which is a name that came to me about 5 years ago. That because I want to distinguish this from my artwork, and that like I actually changed my name to Damien 15 years ago when I became a sculptor. So now there's a new. It's not a name; it's more of a title. Well, I won't go into it at this point, but look for Rishi Jones, and that's what I'm going to be.
How do you spell that?
Rishi, Rishi Jones.
Rishi Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got, you can go, actually, that's the best thing. Go to my Rishi Jones, go to Rishi Jones on Facebook. You can find me there and connect with me that way, because that's where I'm going to be focusing the healing, the sharing of the healing that I've experienced.
Yeah, that's great. And to anybody who's watching right now, I want to tell you about a book that I'm reading right now. It's called South of Forgiveness. South of Forgiveness. It's written by Thordis Elva and Tom Stranger. And Tom Stranger raped Thordis many years ago when they were younger. And they spent a good.
Oh, is this the couple that have? This is the they have a TED Talk.
They have a TED Talk. They have a book. And their journey is amazing. I think it's so inspiring that the survivor and the perpetrator, for lack of better words right now, I don't like those words, but the person who perpetrated, the person who survived that perpetration, were able to find ways to move towards healing together. I'm not suggesting that that is what we should all do. Two of the men that raped me, I don't ever want to see them except perhaps in a court of law. But there are lots of opportunities for healing. I know that my ex-husband and I healed the domestic violence that we perpetrated on each other. And we've been divorced now for 16 years, but we're still friends. So that's the vision that I hold for all of us is to be able to unpack our trauma and also be honest about the ways that we've harmed each other and move forward into a world that is based on love, healing, respect, healthy boundaries.
Mhm.
So anyway, and Damien, is there anything you want to add to that before we log off here?
Well, yeah, I just want to invite you and anyone watching to try this practice right now and just take 3 breaths into your heart. And it's, you don't have to think of it as your heart, but it's really just, I usually put my fingers here on my chest and then just feel the sensation of your chest expanding and contracting, like in the center of your chest. Put your awareness there in the center of your body and just feel your wholeness. The bodies are whole and complete. There's nothing missing. We can directly experience our wholeness through tapping into this. I've been meditating for 15 years, and this practice has brought me far deeper than anything else I've discovered. And I call it hearthing.
Hearthing.
And it's short for heart breath, but really it's about the hearth, which is, the area around the fireplace in the home. So it's the center of your home. It's the place from which light and heat and energy emanate. And with regular attention and intention, you can build your own hearth within and sit by your own light and know your own heat and your own energy. And just start the return back to our bodies.
Thank you, Damien.
Thank you. It's such an honor and such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who stayed with us for this whole time that we were together. We'll see you again soon, I'm sure.